This video is sponsored by Athletic Greens, and to be honest with you, this is one that I'm really excited to talk about. Athletic Greens was kind enough to send me a 30-day supply of AG1, which is an all-in-one nutritional drink that does a lot of really awesome things for your body, like supporting your immunity and improving your mood, focus, gut health, energy, and just a whole bunch more. And let me be honest with you, this was perfect for me because I'll admit, I have never had that healthy of a diet, so historically I've always struggled with energy levels and such. But speaking from my heart, after taking a minute to drink AG1 in the mornings for more than 20 days now, I sleep better, I think better, I have more energy to work and go to the gym every day, and I just feel better. And it complies with any lifestyle choices like keto or paleo or veganism, so I've even got a lot of my friends and family members trying it out too. Whether you're a homebody or an athlete, I cannot recommend drinking AG1 enough. They have a brand new longtime subscriber in me, and if you're curious about improving your health in pretty much every way, click my link in the description below to get a 1-year supply of immune boosting vitamin D3, K2, and 5 travel packs for free with your first purchase. We've only got one life each, so let's take care of it, yeah? And now on to the video. A Zelda game without bosses is like biscuits without gravy, jam, or butter. My fellow southerners will get that one. Like, yeah, you might have a super yummy biscuit that's all warm and fluffy, but without any toppings, where's the hearty flavor? The tangy fruitiness, the melty butter. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom fixed something that a lot of fans had a problem with in its predecessor, and that is the addition of new, unique bosses that serve to flavor up the biscuit that is the world of Hyrule. Now, before we dive headfirst into the waters of explanation, we've got to cover a disclaimer to check for rocks, because okay, I'm done with these weird metaphors for now. Basically, a couple disclaimers to get through. Some of the bosses in Tears of the Kingdom are in fact carryover bosses from Breath of the Wild, such as the Stone Taluses, Hynexes, or Lynels, and as such will not be retouched in this video since their explanations carry over pretty seamlessly if you swap anytime I mention Malice for Gloom. Second, there are still quite a few brand new bosses in Tears of the Kingdom, over 13 to be exact, and because of this larger number, instead of placing them all in one large video, I'm going to split this video up into 2 parts, with most bosses being present in this video and one or more bigger bosses in the second. And you know, YouTube has been known to be a bit moody with its notifications, even for subscribers if it thinks something isn't trendy, so whether or not Zelda is a trending subject right now, make sure you're subscribed and have that bell on so that you know when part 2 gets uploaded. Remember, you can always turn it off later if you change your mind. Anyway, that's all I've got for disclaimers, so without further ado, here we go, and oh yeah, spoiler alert, obviously. Right off the bat, we're going to tackle explaining the bosses that all have something in common, and that would be the majority of the bosses in the game that appear to be either creations of pure gloom or gloom-infused wildlife or remains of organic material such as the Gibdos, not unlike the bosses that were created out of Malice from Breath of the Wild. The bosses that fit this criteria would include the Gleeoks, Colgera, Maragia, Marbled Goma, the Muktarok, the Boss Bokoblin, the Queen Gibdo, and the Phantom Ganons. Obviously, the one thing the vast majority of monsters from both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have in common is Ganon's Malice or Ganondorf's Gloom respectively, but that doesn't mean that there aren't still details to be uncovered about each of these monsters. Boss Bokoblins, for instance, were not present in Breath of the Wild yet are present in Tears of the Kingdom, implying heavily that the events of the upheaval are what led directly to their existence, which is to say that Link and Zelda waking Ganondorf up at the beginning of the game and releasing the full power of his gloom into the world is what directly led to the existence of not only the Bokoblins but the Boss Bokoblins, which are literally just bigger variants of Bokoblins that swing bigger weapons as the result of being, you know, bigger. And bigger is better. Since they are bigger better, they're normally the leaders of their little Bokoblin gangs and lead the whole troop around in their little patrols, which is kind of cute, and wield the most powerful of the Boko weapons. And you know how in the last game everyone was scared whenever they encountered a Lynel? Well, in this game that feeling is still there, but for the new powerful 3-headed dragons called King Ghidorahs, I mean Gleeoks, which come in 4 varieties: Flame, Frost, Thunder, and King, which is a combination of all 3. Tons of fun. These dragons are directly said to have only appeared after the upheaval, which again proves that they are creations of gloom that were released upon the world following Ganondorf's reawakening. Interestingly enough, this is not the only time the Gleeok boss dragon has been seen in the series. Actually, a Gleeok is an original enemy, with its first appearance being being in the first game, The Legend of Zelda, where it appears 3 times as 2, 3, and 4-headed versions of itself. They've appeared in some of the handheld Zelda titles since then, but their terrifying Tears of the Kingdom appearance is the first time we've seen the formidable beasties on a home console since the beginning of the series. And who knows why Ganondorf decided to make them? Maybe the original Gleeoks were also creations of that Ganon, meaning this is just a good old Ganondorf original monster design. Or maybe he was just a big fan of the original game, who knows? Colgera is an interesting boss to encounter in the game, because not only is it a huge flying ice monster that's powerful enough to plunge an entire region into a permanent blizzard, but it's also remarkably similar to an earlier boss in the franchise, the Molgera, in both its name and its design. Both monsters are large, flying serpentine creatures that freely manipulate and travel through not only the air, but the elements they are bound to, with Colgera's element being ice and Molgera's being sand. The other part that's interesting about Colgera is its first appearance being inside the ominous Wind Temple, high above the Rito village. But that's another explanation for the upcoming Lore of the Dungeons video. Have I mentioned that you should be subscribed? Anyway, Colgera's similarity to Molgera extends to the fact that even Molgera was a creation of Ganondorf's back in the Wind Waker. So once again, perhaps this monster design is either a Ganondorf original or a literal resurrection of the monster Molgera, although that's purely speculative. Colgera and most of the other dungeon bosses in the game can all be encountered in multiple different places in the depths after being defeated in their corresponding dungeons, which means there are multiples of each, again proving their existence as pure creations of Gloom. Moving on, the next Gloom boss would be the Queen Gibdo, which is a terrifying combination of giant flying insect and the literal undead. Now, to my knowledge, there's never been a monster quite like this in the series before. We have faced giant insects before, and we've even faced giant undead before, but never a giant flying insect undead. That seems like ground that shouldn't have been crossed, but hey, here we are. The Queen Gibdo appears to simply be a giant super mutated moth Gibdo, which similarly to the Queen also fly with moth wings, and can aggressively spit at Link to hurt him. All of the Gibdo in Tears of the Kingdom, the Queen included, share the weakness to light that the Re-Deads from earlier games in the series also do, which heavily implies a connection between the two types of enemies, that connection being the dark, unholy reanimation of human corpses. The Queen can also produce large amounts of sand, enough to cover the entire Gerudo Desert region in a sand shroud whilst releasing the reanimated moth and regular Gibdos into the area to hunt the living. Creepy stuff. The tiny but mighty Muktarok, which was responsible for covering the entire Zora region in a goopy substance called sludge, appears to really just be a Gloom mutated Octorok, which is quite blatantly proven by the fact that it drops Octo balloons, Octorok eyeballs, and even Octorok tentacles when defeated in the depths. So that was pretty mucking simple. Moving on though, the next boss is the Marbled Rock Roast. I know the substance is technically just called Gloom Rock, but I want to call it Marbled Rock Roast. And Marbled Rock Roast is literally responsible for the following 3 bosses: Yunobo, Miragia, and Marbled Goma. And yes, I do mean that Yunobo from Breath of the Wild. Yunobo was visited by the fake Princess Zelda that was really just a Phantom Ganon in disguise and given a strange mask to wear that altered his personality and made him feed Marbled Rock Roasts to the citizens of Goron City, leading to all of them becoming Gloom-fluenced as well. When he was under the influence, he did end up upgrading his wardrobe a bit and becoming a mob boss though, so I can't be too mad at him. Plus, he snaps out of it once Link beats the mask off of him. The Miragia is an interesting boss because it is clearly named to be a reference to Volvagia, which is the legendary fire dragon that once lived within Death Mountain and was defeated by the Hero of Time wielding the mighty Megaton hammer. Miragia appears to literally be a living rock monster though, so there's not too much to explain here, without pure leaps of speculation. Like if I were to say that it's possible that Miragia is literally the reincarnated spirit of Volvagia given rock form. I mean, its design is pretty draconic and serves to further solidify its references to the dragon Volvagia, who has been long dead at this point, so I would say why couldn't it be a possibility? The final monster that Marbled Rock Roast is responsible for creating would be the Marbled Goma, a huge 4-legged, one-eyed spider-like monster encased in rock that can produce unlimited amounts of Gloom Rock, and right off the bat, veteran fans of the series will recognize the name Goma from several appearances of the other monsters and bosses, all named the same thing that makes several appearances across the franchise, always appearing as a one-eyed arachnid type monster. And perhaps it would be more accurate to say that the Marbled Goma is the one responsible for the Marbled Rock Roast. According to the compendium, the Marbled Goma is the one that spread Gloom Rock across the entire Elden region, meaning Gloom Rock is literally Marbled Goma's secretions. Delicious. Just like the other dungeons bosses, Marbled Goma has callbacks to earlier bosses from the franchise, implying that either Ganondorf keeps his designs or perhaps some monsters reincarnate alongside the Demon King and the spirit of the hero. Now there's a thought. The final Gloom creation boss to tackle before moving on would be the Gloom Spawns, also known as the Phantom Ganons. And strangely enough, I feel like their actual Phantom Ganon appearance is less terrifying than their Gloom Spawn appearance, especially when they start shrieking at you and the sky turns blood red. Now Phantom Ganons have been around in the franchise for some time, with the first appearance of the iconic foe being in Ocarina of Time and subsequently appearing in the Wind Waker, Four Swords Adventures, and Breath of the Wild as the Blight Ganons. In Tears of the Kingdom though, this Ganondorf had the bright idea of literally duplicating himself since he's such a good fighter, and sending these duplicates out into the world with weaponry to seek Link out in order to, you know, make him not alive anymore. Interestingly, the compendium states that Phantom Ganons are made of Ganondorf's own flesh and blood, and since they are creations of Gloom, this would therefore logically imply that Gloom can be described as the flesh and blood of the Demon King. And this would make sense given that the amount of the goopy substance known as Gloom leaking out of his body seems to directly correlate with his dry, dehydrated appearance. But more on that in the next video. Believe it or not, there were actually some bosses in Tears of the Kingdom that were not created by Ganondorf's Gloom. Well, 4 to be exact. The first would be the brand new wild monster species introduced in the game, the Froxes. These giant frog-like beasties appear to be some sort of evolution of a frog that also somehow bonded with Zonite, which all Froxes, including the little babies, drop upon defeat. Their Japanese name is Degugama, which is literally a corruption of the word gama, which means frog. They are completely nocturnal and are shown to hate the light, actively attacking any sort of light bloom that Link places anywhere, and as such they only live deep down in the dark of the depths, which means their history is likely tied to the history of the depths itself, which is tied to the history of the Zonai themselves. But for the time being, they appear to simply be natural wildlife that can grow quite massive and really likes to catch a quick meal by opening their gaping mouths and waiting for a little person to fall in. Be careful spelunking. Next, and speaking of the Zonai, we have the Flux Constructs, which are, well, giant Zonai constructs, created out of multiple giant Zonai blocks which move around using a Zonai force that looks similar to Ultra Hand, which is a Zonai ability. Seriously though, as a little side note, most things in Tears of the Kingdom that are mysterious can be explained by just saying, the Zonai. It's possible they were created to assist in workloads by perhaps transporting mining efforts, but that seems rather unlikely to me since each and every Flux construct is located on a circular battlefield, or a battlefield of some sort, with some literally being on their own little battlefield island. It appears to be quite obvious that these constructs were created purely for trial by combat, and if the theory that all sky islands were raised into the skies above for the purposes of preparing Link to face Ganondorf is to be believed, then therefore these constructs were created literally for Link, just like the other training constructs and constructs of all kinds in all the shrines. But on the other hand, if you believe the Sky Islands may have been up there for a while but obscured by the magical cloud barrier, it is then possible that they were created for other Zonai warriors to practice combat with, but that's neither here nor there. Ultimately, they are combat Zonai constructs that were created for the purpose of training a fighter and even have a very large weak spot. But speaking of which, that leads me to the next Zonai construct boss, the Seized construct, which is faced as the boss of the Spirit Temple. Now this one also has a pretty simple explanation. See, Raru's older sister Mineru was a tinkerer and an inventor. In fact, she and Zelda were somehow able to get the Sheikah warp functions working, well before any Sheikah constructions were present in the world, based solely off of information derived from the Sheikah slate, the Purapad. So yeah, she's kind of an era-defining super genius. She was also very interested in researching the concept of bonding one's spirit with machinery, which she actually ended up doing by bonding herself within the Purapad and eventually awakening to talk to Link and get him to build a new crafter construct from within the construct factory. Why she decided to not talk to Link before this point and maybe brief him about some of the stuff that went down ages ago, who knows? But either way, the Seized construct boss is a gloom-infected crafter construct that is exactly like the one Link assembles under the instruction of Mineru. Its possession by gloom is extremely similar to the way that the Sheikah constructs would be possessed by malice in Breath of the Wild. The final non-gloom created boss in Tears of the Kingdom would be Master Koga, top banana of the Yiga clan himself. Now I know he appeared in Breath of the Wild and therefore has an explanation in my Breath of the Wild boss lore video, but he's a living character who actually has some stuff happen to him in between games that's worth mentioning. If you'll recall, upon being bested by Link in Breath of the Wild, he was pushed by himself down the Yiga hole, which previously had left his fate unanswered. By now, of course, we know that this hole is really just a chasm that leads down into the depths, which Koga survived falling into somehow. Anyway, once down in the depths, he was able to somehow contact his other Yiga clan members and begin moving the operations down there, with the new name of the game being Ultra Hand, Zonite, and the Zonai constructs. Koga's new plan in Tears of the Kingdom, before being beaten once again by Link, of course, is to build yet another crafter construct in order to beat Link and gain the attention of the Demon King, who I'm pretty sure doesn't even know that Koga exists. Ouch. His fate is once again left up to our imagination, since the last thing we see of him is his muscular body being blasted off by 1 million Zonai rockets of his own creation. But you know, somehow, I'm sure he still survived. You may have noticed there's one boss left in Tears of the Kingdom to talk about, and that would be the one, the only Ganondorf Dragmire, also known as the Demon King himself, also known as the Demon Dragon. But you see, there's actually not much solid evidence given to us in the game that would enable us to fully explain Ganondorf's actions in Tears of the Kingdom, which means it is time for a theory. So once again, make sure you're subscribed so you know when part 2 comes out. Because between myself and my good buddy Ran over on my Discord server, we're pretty sure we've got this Ganondorf thing all figured out. On another note though, thank you so much for watching. Did you learn anything new about the bosses of Tears of the Kingdom, or did I miss a detail? Let me know in the comments below, and please consider leaving a like on the video if you enjoyed it, or at least my efforts into making it. Huge thanks as always to my bandit crew, who make my day every day and are the reason the channel can stay alive and continue producing passionately geeky content. That's all for now, so follow me on my socials and I'll see you next time. This is Bandit, signing out. Peace!